My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be The Mammoth Cheese Video 11, Literary Friends. This is my novel, James McIntyre, The Mammoth Cheese, novel by John Passfield, historical photo, 1866, of the box that contained the mammoth cheese and the people who made it and who lived in Ingersoll at the time, celebrating the advent of this wonderful concoction, I guess you call it. I almost said invention, but of course you create cheese, you make cheese. With a contribution of 800 cows, the tiny village of Ingersoll, Ontario, has not only produced the world's largest block of cheese, has also nurtured the epic poet who can rapturously sing its praises. Now, if only Queen Victoria can be persuaded to take a hearty bite and add her majestic voice to the poet's ecstatic hymns of praise, the mammoth cheese will become the edible jewel in the crown of the globe-girdling British Empire. Well, in this video, I'm going to read from the image scenes in which the main character, James McIntyre, who is a poet, imagines himself to be the friend of a number of famous artistic creators. There are 6 imaginary friendships with 3 image units devoted to each fantasy. So let's look at the first one then on page 18. There it is. So he's imagining these friendships as he's thinking of other things. My old friend and I, sifting through the burnt-out ruins of Troy, slaking our thirsts with a charred wooden bucket, a welcome draught of cold water from a well. I don't know, James, Homer mutters as I help him pick his way among the debris. Before we came here, it seemed like such a good idea, but who would want to read an epic on the fall of Troy? So that's image scene 1. Here's image scene 2. Obviously, this is Homer. So James McIntyre and his friend Homer, 2 poets. My friend is feeling downcast. Right now, James, he mutters, it's all bits and pieces in my mind. We are sitting by the fire. We have spent most of the day shoring up the sagging sheepfold with brambles and thorns. It's a huge undertaking, and my eyes are going bad, and I might go blind. The Iron Age pot is coming to the boil. So that's the second image scene of James McIntyre and his friend Homer. Here's the third and final one. How to reassure my friend. He's old and going blind and has never tried to write an epic before. He strums a simple note or two on his lyre. Well, I like what you've told me, I say, to reassure my friend. Just start with something simple, like Agamemnon's dream, and go on from there. Well, he did go on from there. Let's go to the second one, page 34, of these fantasies, these fantasy friendships that the poet James McIntyre has with other creative people. Shakespeare and I, holding the horses outside the theater, 2 young whippersnappers trying to get a foot in the door. He is adjusting a strap on a bag of oats. Out of all the young would-be dramatists, James, who are flooding into London, I would estimate that you and I stand the best chance of becoming what we were both of us meant to be. So, kind words from Shakespeare for his friend, imaginary friend, James McIntyre. Here's the second image scene. Shakespeare and I in an empty tavern. We've taken a stroll along the bank of the Thames. He doesn't want the others to overhear. I have the first line, James, but I'm not sure how the rest of it should go. To be or not to be, that is the question. He takes a quill and sharpens the end and offers it to me. He pushes the ink pot across the table and places a piece of clean paper in front of me. Here, let's see what the 2 of us can do. So here's James McIntyre helping his friend Shakespeare write one of the most famous speeches in the English language. Here's the third image scene of James McIntyre and his imaginary friend Shakespeare. A note from a very close friend. Shakespeare's having trouble with his new play. His spelling is not improved, but I squint and peruse. I meet him at the dock. I call it the sandbag scene, James. It's not going well. You are always chock full with ideas, dramatic to your fingertips. Could you come up with another way to have her die? We take a water taxi across the Thames. I'll have to think about this for a while, Will. If I get an idea, perhaps I'll rough out the whole scene. It'll have something to do with putting out a light. So if you know your Shakespeare, here's James McIntyre, perhaps even writing one of the great scenes in the play Othello for his friend Shakespeare. Well, it's a fantasy. Here's another one, page 50. Here we are. My friend Byron does not praise lightly. Of my poem, Childe Harold, James, as you know, I am justifiably proud. A superior literary feat, to be sure, but the poem that you wrote, James, as we chased ourselves around Europe, was a better poem, I have to admit, by far. Too bad it was swept away when we crossed that raging ford. Image scene 2. My Lord Byron is in his cups. The candles gutter and flicker and fade. Your ghost story, James, the one that you told that night, 'twas a story that put the rest of us in the shade. If envy is a sin, then guilty am I. Too bad it floated away on the scum of that foul-smelling bog. Our glasses clink loudly as the curtains conceal the dawn. Well, if his was the best story that night, then it was better than Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in the opinion of his imaginary friend, Lord Byron. Too bad it was lost. We go on to page 64 for another fantasy. Here we are. Trelawney and I gathering driftwood on the beach near Leghorn, making a funeral pyre for the body of Shelley, a true friend. Were I not prone to queasiness, I had gone. The second image scene. Shelley and I were like two brothers. Shelley and I were like two friends. Shelley and I would always read each other's poems. Now his pen is at the bottom of the sea. All I can think of is Shelley saying that he couldn't wait to see the looks on people's faces on the day that my poems came out in book form. Well, this is imaginary, but there is a book of James McIntyre's poems, and you can access it on the internet. It wasn't a book that Shelley got to see, though. Okay. The third image unit. Trelawney and I piling driftwood on the pyre. Trelawney nursing the army burnt, retrieving the still beating heart. I should have gone with him, Trelawney. Queasiness or no, I could have raised the anchor and reefed the sails. The double loss of a double greatness of Shelley and McIntyre. The day is cold. We shiver and scrounge the beach. We toss the gathered firewood onto the bier. So the death of Shelley then on a beach in Italy. And James McIntyre was there. Let's go to page 80 for another one. A room by the Spanish Steps. Severn needs a break, and I inform him that I would be glad to watch the young poet as he sleeps. Severn takes exception, but I shoo him away. What though I expose myself to consumption? What of that? An honor, I say to Severn, an honor it would be to have caught the consumptive malady from the lungs of John Keats. Second image unit in the Keats fantasy. John Keats furrows his brow. I lift his head, cradle in my arms, and he sips from the glass that I prefer. Here lies one whose name was written water, he sighs, and sinks back exhausted on the pillow. Nay, John, I say, you shall be among the English poets after your death. And then we go on to the third one in the Keats fantasy, in the mind of James McIntyre. His furrowed brow clears and he whispers through smiling lips, "Yes, James, I'm sure that you are right in your conjecture. We shall both of us be remembered. I'm sure that in future one will not say the word Keats without saying Keats and McIntyre, and one will not say McIntyre without saying McIntyre and Keats. Two comets, clog dancing arm in arm in the poetic sky." He closes his eyes and is able at last to sleep. So that's his fantasy of his friendship with Keats. The next one, page 96, I'll find it here first. Is not a poet or a writer, but is a creative artist whom James McIntyre knew in his imagination. "I rush to the rooms of Beethoven. I clutch a note in my hand. It is cryptic, but the urgency is clear. Is the great one on his deathbed? My life is in your hands. Only you can save me. Pray make haste and come to my side. If you fail me, the consequences shall be dire." So a note from his friend Beethoven. Image Unit 2. Image Scene 2. Beethoven lies in bed. There's agony on his brow. "I've lost my notes, James. I've lost my memory. That time I hummed that tune. You were there. You said you liked it. And the poem to set it to." He sinks back onto the pillow. "My friend is clearly bereft. If you cannot remember, James, I don't know what I shall do." Okay, let's go to the third image unit then in the McIntyre-Beethoven relationship. Here it is. "Yes, of course, I remember, Ludwig. I hum the tune." And a smile breaks forth on that agonized brow. "And the poem? Which was that? Do you perchance remember, James?" "Why, Ludwig, it was Schiller's Ode to Joy." "Oh, now I can finish my symphony. I'm calling it my 9th. Is there any way I can thank you? Perhaps I could name it after you." "No need, Ludwig," I whisper as I fluff his pillow up. "No need at all." So that's the story of the 9th Symphony almost becoming the James McIntyre Symphony by Beethoven, but he was too modest to accept that as a compliment from his imaginary friend. It's been said that with the invention of movies, television, and now the internet, it's possible for people to feel close to people whom they've never actually met. Actually, this is not strictly a 20th and 21st century phenomenon. Previous to the invention of these electronic media, people read books by authors whom they had never had the opportunity to meet. They even read books by authors who lived outside of their own time. It's interesting to consider that we sometimes read about an author's personal life, which is generally true of the Romantic poets, but that we also read about an author's image life, which is true of an author like William Shakespeare, whose personal life never appears on the surface of his writings. Do you have a favorite author, whether living or dead, so favorite as to cause you to feel an affinity, either with the details of that author's lifestyle or with the image patterns that the author makes of the circumstances of the fictional characters that appear in his or her novels? So close do we feel we come to an author that one can fantasize that in reading her books, one is spending time with Jane Austen and developing a friendship. People go to Bath to feel close to Jane Austen. They go to Haworth to feel close to the Bronte sisters. Similarly, those with intense imaginations visit their favorite authors in their own minds. They have conversations with those authors and develop friendships with those authors. One can only wonder, when reading this particular novel, whether the imaginary friendships of the main character, James McIntyre, are beneficial or detrimental to his welfare. What does he expect to get from these imaginings? What does he actually get from these imaginings? What would be gained or lost if there were no such imaginings in his thoughts? So these thoughts are imagery in his mind. They mix with the imagery of his own real everyday life. Sometimes images in our minds are beneficial. They enhance our lives, help us to understand our lives better and live our lives better. Sometimes they're detrimental. They undermine some of the positive elements in our lives. Once again, this is my novel, James McIntyre, The Mammoth Cheese. You can have a look at Amazon where there's more information. My publisher's website, rocksmillspress.com, rocksmillspress.com, has more information. And my website, johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca, has more information in the form of 2 free books that you can read. A planning notebook, how did I plan the novel and write it? A journal, what did I think of the novel as I was reviewing it, as I was polishing it before sending it to my publisher. So have a look if you're interested in those books on my website, johnpassfield.ca. Lastly, I will say thank you for watching this video.